All right, how's everybody doing? I figured I'd go on here for a minute. Hopefully, you guys were all watching Viva and Barnes and catching Allison over there. Obviously, she needs a couple minutes to get herself together and come on here for a while. We were looking at maybe debating the episode tonight and delaying it, but there's childcare considerations and things like that. So we're going to do it for a while. Allison's going to be on for a while, and then I have some people coming on after. And it seems like everything's about cops now. So we're going to be talking a little bit about some cop shootings. But most importantly, to get things started off right, what are we having? I'm having High Ally. And I got introduced to High Ally when I went to a Disney resort as part of my company. The company had an overflow at the Gaylord Hotel in Orlando, and they wound up putting us in the Disney resort as an overflow. And I managed to find a new beverage called High Ally, and even more importantly is it's on sale at BJ's and very inexpensive. So I get to have that. So what is everybody else having here? I definitely want to see. I know we've got a couple coffee drinkers. I think Courtney is a typical coffee drinker, and Divinity. Oh, yes. Somebody caught it. The Three Eternal Truths. I thought that I'd keep in the theme of the night. This is a really great deal to have Allison go on and get a chance to get her name out there even more. I mean, she's a rock star, and I really love to see her grow. I intend to float in her wake and grow with her. Okay, look at this. Look at this. Okay, a lot of responsible people here. Water, water. Sierra Mist. Okay, we got vodka. Good job, Scott. Okay, now I feel a little bit better. We have orange water, sparkling water. And somebody was saying that I speak slower than David or Viva Fry. Yes, yes, I do. Just about everyone speaks slower than he does. But you can understand him, which is really cool. And I like the fact that he plays with people in a way who like to listen to their shows quicker, because listening to him at a higher rate of speed, you have to have some dedicated ears. Hazy Little Thing IPA, water, Japanese whiskey. Okay, that's going a little bit upscale. Jack and Coke, Magic Dragon Sour. Is that a sour beer, Pupta? I've had sour beer, and phew, if you want me to slow down on drinking beer, I would say that sour does the trick, because that stuff is so intense. I could barely handle it at all. And okay, who is it? Somebody said that they still listen to Viva. Steven, you have some amazing ears. That is super impressive. I don't like listening to anything at a higher rate of speed, even audiobooks when I'm researching. If it really a slow narration, I'll bump it to like 1.25 or 1.5, something like that. Jason Bryant, how you doing? Are you out doing any tournaments now? Are the rules lightened up? This guy right here, Jason Bryant, is an amazing dude. He actually announces for wrestling. So if you're watching the Olympics and you hear somebody in the background talking, not the television anchors, but the people outside the ring who are announcing the event, that's him. He does that for a living. Really amazing guy. And I don't know, Blue Island, I haven't been there for a little bit. It's funny, I live down the road from a brewery and I don't spend enough time there. So to get us started here, let's go. Somebody listens to a Jocko podcast at 1.2 speed. Is that like slightly more intense at a time? I can only imagine that. Jocko is, I like Jocko, but he's an acquired taste. He could be a little bit much to me. And I am going to share something which I think is funny. This was shared to me on Locals, this particular page. So I immediately followed them on Twitter. It's called Not the Bee, which I love because I feel like the Babylon Bee and the Onion are going to be going out of business anytime, because things aren't even ironic anymore. It's just nuts. David March, thank you very much. New member, thank you. Seriously, have you noticed that you read headlines or people send you a link and you're like, "No, that can't be real. That can't that cannot be real." But sure enough, it is. So then you're like, "Well, why do we have the Onion? Why do we have Babylon Bee?" Well, that's what we have Not the Bee for, is they collect headlines or funny things. And I just love this because does anybody else find it really annoying, the little tour that Hank Azaria and everybody's doing and apologizing that God forbid he's done voices for other cultures and things like that? Well, John Cleese has decided to troll him, and I love this. Not wishing to be left behind by Hank Azaria, I would like to apologize on behalf on the Monty Python for all the mini sketches we did making fun of white English people. We're sorry for any distress we may have caused. And of course, that would be great in a nice plummy accent, which I cannot do. I don't know if I've told you the story about that, but I tried to do a little bit of community theater and stage acting way back in the day. And I cannot do an accent to save my life. I have almost no accent anyway. So I can't do Southern. I can't do English. I just can't do anything. I was attempting to do one because I was essentially the lead in the play, 10 Little Indians, speaking of PC, also known as And Then There Were None. And the character was British. So I put upon this particular accent. And then we had somebody who was actually British in the cast. And being a glutton for embarrassment, I made the mistake of asking him, "Well, how am I doing? Is it that bad?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'd say it's pretty consistent wherever you're from." So that gives you an idea. So I cannot do an accent to save my life, but whatever accent I do, it's consistent. So jumping forward to another story, and this is brought up on locals. This one was brought up on locals too. I believe this was Trenton, and I have to do my mandatory pitch like Barnes. Please go to unstructured.locals.com and also go to alisonmorrow.locals.com. I definitely, please follow, both of us. You don't have to pay necessarily. Obviously, we would love it if you did. And, we both, Allison and I guess off the record, we've kind of maybe taken a little bit of criticism because we are trying to make it as accessible as much as possible. And we charge the lowest amount. Dachshund Rule, thank you so much for being a member. Anyway, we charge only a couple bucks, and we may have to go up later because I don't know if they're going to change the rules internally. But we really do want to be accessible to everybody, and it's more important to us to build a bigger community to get the input from everybody. And so that's why we keep it really low. Our theory is that, between the two of us, you can afford us. $5 a month adds up when it's 5. Well, maybe having, the pair of us, it's, only $4. And that we can kind of tuck in with some of the bigger names and creators. So that's sort of our theory behind that. Now, on locals, oh, great, Eric. I managed to pick the search, but somebody asked if I was going to cover the surveys that are being sent out for Pfizer vaccines. And I had to look it up because sure enough, it's a scam. And I just want to let everybody know that obviously a lot of what I do on my channel is deal with social engineers and scam artists and things like that. And COVID's been a godsend for scammers and social engineers because there is no easier way to collect information than to, get a vulnerable population that is already scared. You get a hold of their email address, and what they're doing is they're sending out an email, for example, and they're saying there have been people who have been found who have COVID in your place of employment. Please click here to get the report. Now, if you're on LinkedIn or other things, people can, can extract, if you will, or figure out, hey, this is where you work. So now they got your name, you've got your email. They fire you this email, and it's relatively convincing. You're already a little bit nervous about this stuff. So they send it and they go, X number of people at employment name have been found to have COVID. Please click this to fill out this report to make sure you don't or what. And you go right down the path. And that is one scam. Another scam that is out there, and this is really slipping by a lot of people. Have you guys been getting a lot of text messages? And I know I get these quite a bit. Walmart just said that I won something because I shopped there. Well, that's called a cold reading. A lot of people shop at Walmart. So the odds are pretty high you hit a number that somebody probably did shop at Walmart. And good news, on my receipt, I won something. So if I click it, they could grab all of my information and sucker me out of it. So that is called smishing, SMS ishing, if you will. So everybody's heard of phishing, which is, an email message, you click it and they get your information, right? Well, SMS is now texting, and that is the hottest item for scam messages. And it could be very effective too. Again, using the COVID principle, we've got COVID tests are now available in the city. There's a limited supply. Go get one now. Click here to reserve your appointment, for example, or any number of things. So it gets really, really, really frustrating as people are going along and essentially scamming a situation. Let me see. This is for Allison, whenever she gets here. After having seen too many Mark Dice videos, I cannot listen to Mark Stelter without thinking of Mark Dice. I'm having a brain fart. I don't remember who Mark Dice is. I am very, 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 very ashamed to say. So somebody please fill in. What am I missing? Who's Mark Dice again? Because I'm obviously having a blonde moment. I don't have much hair left, but that which I do have is actually blonde. So try not to hold it against me. All right. So let me see here. Pull that down. And tech director, CNN. That is actually Charlie. Mike Bruno is a regular. Charlie Chester, Mike Bruno, is the tech director, I believe. And yes, we will be talking about that. Okay, Mark Dice is a conservative video reporter who butts up against the official narrative. Well, perfect. And somebody else said that he's based. Okay, well, that's good to know. Good to know. And we have with us the star of the evening. How are you doing?
Talking for 2 hours is a lot of time. And I'm pretty sure I got filleted in their comments or in the chat, but that's okay. Because now I'm with friends.
Okay. Well, why would they fillet you? Well, I don't know. That's
why does anybody fillet anyone? I don't know. I didn't read the chat because I didn't want to.
I was too busy.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want to get thrown off my game, So, but yeah, I think people didn't like my glasses. They didn't think I was hard enough on mainstream media. And I don't know. There were a couple other things.
Hey, good news. I just turned on monetization and already went to yellow. Thank you, YouTube.
What? For what?
Instant.
Why? What is this title?
I literally just turned on. I forgot to turn it on to start. Turn it on, went straight to yellow.
What is this even titled? They don't trust you. They're putting you on a short leash.
It's titled News with Booze. It was probably because it has your name on it. You dangerous Viva Fry and Robert Barnes freakazoid. Okay, that's right. What are you having? A Maldic or
Yep, I'm drinking a Malbec because I promoted it on the
Malbec?
live stream. So why not? I don't know.
Cool.
Did everybody see my prop that Lynn got me for the live stream?
Oh, really? I can't imagine you eating the food.
I don't, but it's because somebody in the chat said that an Emmy is like a Burger King crown.
Oh, nice.
So Lynn
Nice.
drove all the way. That's true love when your husband drives to a Burger King, which he knows you hate, just to get you the crown for a
Well,
live
maybe
stream.
he wanted a Whopper.
Oh, look, see. Oh, we got a first time watching. No, I'm
I
sure
know.
Lynn got something while he was there. I'm sure he
Oh
used it as
yeah.
an
I mean,
excuse
come
to
on.
buy it. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, come on. There's only so much sacrifice for you. Goodness. Oh, they
Yeah.
heard your remarks on light beer.
Yeah, I hate light beer. Go away if you're drinking light beer. You're not allowed to drink here. No. Just
All
kidding.
right. Let's see. Isaac Castillo loves your glasses,
Thank you.
and you can never be too hard on mainstream
Oh,
media.
Lynn said I have it on backwards. I didn't know there was a right way to wear this. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Well, yeah, I guess you got to advertise the product.
Yeah, you can never be too hard on mainstream news. No. Okay, listen, I want to clarify since we're in our group therapy session real fast that
Sure.
I want everybody to know that I would be hard pressed to find somebody who is more depressed about what's happening in mainstream news than me, because that's actually where I came from. So like everybody else on the outside who's like hates it and rages on it and stuff, imagine if that was your family. Like imagine if you're not just looking at grandma who, is doing crazy things or whatever, like it's someone else's grandma, but it's your grandma. And
Sure.
it's like it just makes you really sad. So like there's just so much more there that like when I talk about it, and I'm not doing what you hear most people do, and I'm trying to really help people understand what is going on. It's not because I'm trying to make excuses. It's because I know these people and I know the real problems and I want to fix them. Trust me, there's nobody more interested like in this video, the chat and between you and me or whatever, like that's watching this video right now. Like I'm the biggest critic and I would be the biggest fan of reform. But so it's not that I think that it's just great. And that's why it's just that I want people to understand the nuances of the problems. And that's why it's like, it would be very easy to think that there are a bunch of criminals walking around newsrooms who know they're lying and are intentionally trying to brainwash you. And the reality is, and maybe Eric, you can tell the story again about that experiment that you talked about on my live stream yesterday about how easy it is for people to think that they're doing God's work when in fact they're doing evil things.
Yeah. Okay. That was Milgram experiment, and it was put forth by a scientist. I think it was Stanley Milgram. Don't hold it against me if I got the first name wrong. But anyway, his family suffered greatly in World War II. He was of Jewish descent. And in Nuremberg trials and whatever, people were saying, hey, I was following orders. Hey, I was following orders. And the thought at the time was, no, you were doing monstrous actions. You can't just give me that BS of you're just following orders. So he came up with an experiment. It's probably one of the best psychological experiments ever done. And what he did was he put together a situation that involved a doctor, a teacher, and a student. Now, the doctor was just some actor, playing the doctor. They had a lab coat on. That's it. There was no proof or anything else. All they had was a lab coat on, and they were actually running the experiment. And then the teacher is the person who was being tested. The teacher was on the one side of a screen, and their job was to ask questions of the student. And the student would, anytime they got it wrong, the teacher would have to give them a shock. Now, the student was also an actor, and their job was, as the shocks went progressively higher, because each time they got it wrong, they'd go up another increment, they would react more strongly because they were getting shocked more strongly for each one. and the shocks went all the way up to like 400 volts, 500 volts, or whatever. And it was, like marked off that it was, almost fatal or highest level. And essentially what happened was the teacher would, ask a question, they get wrong, shock, 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 shock. Then all of a sudden on the other side of the wall, the student would be like, oh my God, it's hurting. And then, they'd be screaming, my heart, I'm going to be dying. Oh, my heart. And obviously the teacher would be sitting there, they'd be looking, well, what am I going to do? And the only thing that the actor who's playing that was the white coat could say was, we really need to proceed with the experiment. We really need to proceed with the lesson. And it was about like 60% more people who technically killed the person on the other side of the wall. Now, the reason why this is so powerful of an experiment is you could poke holes in it and say, okay, well, this was at a college environment and you went in there and you're like, okay, well, they're not really going to make people do whatever. He did it in different places. He would go to hotel rooms. He would go out. He conducted the experiment over and over and over in very unlikely locations and things like that. And consistently over and over and over, they were killing people. Got a couple super chats. I got to get these. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Allison, you were great on Viva and Barnes. If you're really considering homeschooling, Ziggy's glad to give you info.
That'd be awesome.
Oh, cool. You did your kids K through 12 and both got into college early. I'm sure they probably did.
The public school system is such a mess, and we can't afford private school. So we're either going to have private school would be the coyotes training our kid. So it's public school.
I don't say that too loud. You have Lynn. Yeah, I kind of like, well, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
All right. Unclassified name. Do we share the proceeds of super chats for News with Booze? Am I the one driving you guys nuts to get tips on locals?
Oh yeah, we got to do that. The tip jar on locals.
I can't. That's only available for Dave Rubin at this point, and I did ask them about it.
Really?
I think there's some problems with it rolling out.
I think you can do tips. I just haven't looked. I haven't looked into it yet, but I think you can. No, we don't. We've talked about the sharing the super chats. We don't do that yet, just because they're so minimal. So
they are, and I mean, we'll definitely work it through. So definitely, especially when we over tip each other on super chats.
Well, and it's like YouTube takes 30%. So, you get like $4 or $5 super chats and you're basically left with what? $5, $10 maybe.
Yeah. I think you can do one-time donations on locals though.
Yeah, you can.
Because somebody did that for me. And I know that, we said it, and I was just talking about it earlier, how we keep it really low. And I kind of confess that you and I have been criticized sort of heavily because we keep it really low.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to give more, believe me, we will.
Yeah, we won't refuse you.
Delighted. Yes, yeah. I promise we won't force a refund. And if you can or want to give more, thank you very much. We just really want it to be accessible to as many people as possible.
Right.
So, okay. Speaking of news off the rails, and Allison and I actually had a discussion about this earlier, because none of these things are in black and white, but this Project Veritas video, it's amazing. And just found out too, I'm actually going to jump off this for a second to share this news. This producer, and I think that this is probably a really good guy, just stating his opinion. He's out on a date. He's just having a couple drinks, well, like I'm doing right now, and just talking. And after doing this, his LinkedIn's gone. So I will not be surprised to find out that Charlie Chester is no longer an employee of CNN. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. And truthfully, I think CNN, I'm not impressed with them at all. I don't like the network per se, but they absolutely could use this situation.
Right.
And do something, even if, I hate to say, if they want to bullshit things. Again, I study this kind of stuff, but they could put out some bit of like, we've taken note of what is going on here, and we're very much internalizing in our organization. And then they could blow it off and never do anything about it. And then they could, or they could say that Allison pointed out earlier that the technical director is kind of like a blue collar job at the network. And they could say that, well, understand that opinion contributors are going to ask leading questions. That's a normal thing. And being a technical director, he really doesn't understand the nuance of how the news is going. And they could do that, and then they could pat themselves on the back and say how they faced everything head on and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
What
Or
say you?
hey, we're taking his concerns to heart, and we're gonna look at our product and see if he's right. If we
Let's
can
not
change
stretch it out
things.
too much here. At
Yeah.
least I'm giving a cynical out, which would fit a pattern.
I want to know what you think about this, because I was talking to Lynn earlier. The way that Project Veritas went about this does not sit completely well with me. And the reason is, I have no problem with him listening in on like the editorial calls. Remember when those tapes were released?
Zucker tapping the Zucker line?
Yeah, because those
Because he's
people
punching up,
are
right?
right. They're in an editorial meeting. They know who they're talking to, and they know the environment, and that they are in the situation in which they are representing what they're discussing. Right? They're at work and they're talking.
Oh, okay.
I don't love deceptive tactics where you are not telling somebody entirely who you are and what you're up to, and you're asking leading questions. And to me, that's like what the CIA does, or the FBI. And
somebody brought up honeypot. This is a honeypot.
If I'm a journalist, I don't consider myself a journalist anymore if I've deceived the person about who I am. And I'm like, I'm at that point, I'm not just interviewing someone, I'm affecting the scene now. So it's like, I don't like it when journalists do that. I don't like it when journalists insert themselves into the story and into the scene that they're covering. And I feel like my problem with this is, do we know that guy's if he could be a total D-bag that was just trying to, get this girl in the sack. Like, we have no idea if what he was saying, he would have said because he was really being honest, or he was just trying to like sound like the big guy in town. Like, we don't know any of that stuff. And so the techniques, right, I think for me on this one, disparage a little bit the product.
I can see it, but the content though, okay, let's talk about on different levels, because remember last week we were talking about the defense in the Chauvin trial?
Yeah.
And how he primed that question so well? Mm-hmm. Well, we've got potentially priming on priming here.
Yeah.
What this technical director, Chester, was talking about is how the CNN hosts are absolutely priming. They're even going to another degree. They're flat out stating what they want to hear within the question and then asking the question. Now, the biggest irony is, as you put it, obviously the person who was dating him or on the date with him was an operative for Project Veritas, and she very well could have been priming him to a degree when asking the questions. So it is kind of a crazy situation, and I can understand the aspect of entrapment, essentially, where you're like, okay, well, how drunk was he? He really wants to impress her. If she's responding more to this kind of answer versus that kind of answer, is that completely fair? Or you and I, if we were out drinking, would probably get in trouble.
When you and I were going back and forth by text, I was like, let's just say it's your friend, okay? Or an industry you like. Say it's cops, okay? Say people who are like, back the blue types. And somebody, goes out on a date with a cop and they're just spouting all kinds of crap. And you're like, okay, if you like, all that stuff could be really true. Like all these terrible things about like law enforcement or whatever. But would you react the same way about that? Like if it's somebody, if it's an industry that you tend to be more biased towards versus against, would you think these tactics are the same, that you're agreeing with them now? Would you agree with them then? I guess that's my question there too.
I don't know. It's a hard call. I mean, like I said, when I was really young, and I mean, it was like high school, but it was in a sort of advanced school, I was taught every, handy little tactic to get whatever I wanted out. So everything he's saying here, I was studying that in 86. And
he said nothing shocking. I mean, I feel like watching that, there was not even one point where I was like, Oh my God. I would like all of that stuff. I'm like, okay, like I just, and maybe that's a sad testament to what I think about
Mhm.
CNN, but, but I was not sitting there like, oh wow, that's novel. I'm like, okay, that basically fits with everything I feel like I've already learned about CNN.
But folks, look, she still is so careful and doesn't want to hurt her crazy ass family who
No, that's
absolutely are
not
going to do
true.
this.
It's all no, it's
Well, no,
just
this
so
is
bad. It's like I've already heard all this bad stuff. It's so bad. I don't even I guess that's the thing. None of this shocks me anymore because it's that bad. It's just that bad. But this guy could be, like I said, we don't even know this guy, and he should not be fired. I'm sorry. I really do not believe CNN should fire
I
this
agree.
guy. I think if they do that, that's just terrible on their part. And people do need to understand that
Mhm.
this dude, a technical director, is not somebody that is involved typically in
Sure.
editorial decision making. They're the person who is doing the technical side of things, like they're pulling up the banners on the lower third ticker across the street, or like you have 20 cameras with 20
Mhm.
different feeds coming in. You're like, oh, I want to take camera 4, take camera 5. Like that's what technical directors are doing. They're not sitting in editorial meeting. Like, in other words, I guess just to say, if you should be more shocked by the Jeff Zucker tapes that Project Veritas put out there than
Right.
this, because that stuff to me was far worse. Because Jeff Zucker, A, is the guy that's in control actually making decisions, and B, they're all saying that in the situation in which they're making those decisions, where this is just some dude who's drinking with some girl. Like I just don't think they're apples to apples in that. I think you should be more concerned
I
about
do
the
think,
Jeff Zucker tapes.
and you're right. And by the way, that he'll come back into it. I think that might be the one enlightening thing that came out of this was the bat phone.
Yeah, that
The
was
fact
pretty
that
funny.
Jeff
But we had
Zucker
that too.
himself, no, that
Yeah.
he himself is literally watching this all day and mucking with it. Now, come on, at your news organization, didn't you have higher ups that you would barely ever see because you had a chain of command? That the top guy is that wired in and calling down. That I actually found to be kind of interesting.
Mhm. No, I
But
mean, I find these things informative, but I guess maybe it's just because I know how things work behind the scenes that it just doesn't
mhm,
it just kind of confirms things I guess I already know. Um, Whereas I can understand why people on the outside are like, "What?" You know, but but I'm just here. I guess I'm trying to find the best words for this because obviously I have a very difficult time articulating it in a way that people understand both the severity with which
no
I view
practice.
this, which I do, right? Like I do think this is a severe problem, but I also try to understand it like the experiment you brought up, trying to understand the human behavior side of it and the problems with the
Sure.
psychology and everything there. And I guess like when it comes to this, what I see, the vast majority of the people, I see them as like uncurious, thoughtless lemmings with kind of a chip on their shoulder, celebrity complex.
Mhm.
And I really don't think they're smart enough to be sinister. That's the thing. It's like everybody thinks they're so sinister. I'm like, you have to be intelligent to be sinister. And
Well,
and
this
and
comment actually nails it on that. That you're saying cognitive dissonance
oh,
is the
okay, good.
overriding
Yeah.
cause, and I think that that's a fair statement, and it definitely goes into that.
I don't think a lot of people
It's like
got
the
it.
smoke. It's like the doctor who smokes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, I mean, and they used to talk about I read this book about I can't even remember the name of it, but it was another journalism history book, and Edward R. Murrow used to report on smoking, and he
Mhm.
smoked, and and so and like you could tell in his reporting in the stuff that they show in the book anyway that he wanted to really give the cigarette companies the benefit of the doubt because he was smoking them,
Mm.
and then it just was like everybody
Mhm.
around him, and so we're all capable of it. But I don't think most people understood what I was saying. I think a lot of people they're so angry, which I understand. But like I'm really just trying to help you understand what's going on
Right.
and not just, rage on YouTube about it so that I'll just get you even more enraged, but you won't be better educated about what the real problems are behind the scene.
Well, that's why I think that the media is chasing Como on the sex scandal over COVID. Because if they chase him on COVID when they were celebrating him a year ago, then
Yeah.
now they have to take ownership of that
Right.
versus he's a pervert and a jerk and a harasser. They can just
Right.
go to town comfortably. And I've argued with Viva about that constantly because I am very sure that's why they're doing that. He's thinking it's a little bit more malicious than that, but I'm there.
Yeah.
On their last show, Allison, the chat was mostly favorable, but yes, on a stream that big, you'll get haters too.
Yeah. I hope.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, Bob Wildfish is one of my favorite commenters on my channel because very smart and sends me lots of good information. And I said on the chat or in the live stream that I've learned a lot from people in the comment section and people who send me emails. And I'm glad that there are folks out there who are willing to take a chance on me and recognize that I don't know everything. And I certainly didn't know everything when I was in TV news. And if I had been approached with a lot of like just anger and you suck, and nobody had just said, hey, maybe Allison can do better, I'm going to give her the opportunity, then I never would have gotten to where I am. And so that's another place for why I approach this topic the way I do, because for the 1 out of 1,000 people who are able to wake up, I want to approach them in a manner that's like, you can do better. And I'm not going to get them to pay attention if I just, I call them like Jeffrey Epstein, I'm just, because not that I'm trying to sugarcoat it at all. It's just because I really do believe the vast majority are they're totally unaware of how terrible they are. Like how terrible the work is that they're doing and the consequences of it. I just don't think they're aware of it at all. So anyway, that's
we have one more super chat in here. Mike Bruno. Again, the question is, who left of center thinks CNN is gospel? Who? No one.
A lot of journalists are watching CNN constantly in newsrooms. That's all they watch. And they do believe CNN is gospel. It's in airports. It's like, you know what I mean? What do you mean? It's not like, that's the thing. It's like, what other newsroom is just like publicly broadcast everywhere?
It is true. Yeah, it's kind of set as the baseline.
Yeah, it's like if you go to the car dealership and they're like, we don't want to offend anyone, they put on CNN because it's still looked at that way in the establishment class. And I do think that journalists, that's what they watch constantly. I spent years in those newsrooms. They have these little TVs, right next to their, like on their desk, right there next to their little pens. And they're just, all they do is watch CNN constantly all day long.
Yep, I believe it. So while we're on less contentious subjects, I know that you're tight on your schedule because you've been live streaming all night. I brought somebody in to talk about something calmer, like cops. It seems to be all the rage now. And so why not have a non-confrontational, very calm, thoughtful, mellow cop to come in? And by the way, are you a former Marine? I think you are, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Awesome. So we were wondering about that last time because my husband is.
You guys were shit talking Marines or something?
No, my husband. I'm married to a Marine.
No, her husband's a Marine.
Okay. That doesn't mean you weren't shit talking.
What were you in the Marine?
That's true. It doesn't mean we weren't shit talking.
Well, I served in a B billet my whole time, so it was like 8152 or something like that. I was in a FAST team. It's a fleet anti-terrorism security team. It's like glorified site security. And
they're going to get along just well. They'll be perfect.
Yeah.
Do you want me to put Lynn in this hot seat and then I'll leave, or do you just want to continue on with the two of you guys?
I'll leave it to you because I know that you have childcare considerations.
I'll go out and ask him, and if he comes back here, then you guys can. But just try to wrap it up by like midnight, all right? Because
no, we're not going to be going that long.
Okay,
but we do have to talk about.
I'll leave the crown.
Holy goodness! We again unstructured.locals.com. Please, everybody, come on because. This question came from that when I put out, hey, we're doing news with booze. What do you want to hear? So everybody's like, cops. So somebody brought up that there was an incident and it was near me. And I was like, what? Because I don't really watch the local news. But anyway, there is is the Air Force Army lieutenant? I can't remember now.
Army
lieutenant. Okay. And I was Army. Isn't that sad? That's how much I distanced myself. Anyway, an Army lieutenant was at a gas station and there were a couple cops. There was an encounter. He was pepper sprayed. I find the video to be extremely troubling. I, of course, shared it with Dr. Wood. And your immediate reply kind of shocked me. And what was that?
Probably. I don't see what the big deal is.
Yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll look at it a little bit here. This is the cops that are coming.
Driver,
hold
roll
on.
the window down.
You know what helps is if I put it up on the screen and people can actually see it.
Ooh,
It's
fancy.
far more entertaining. You can tell I'm a real professional.
Okay, so let's before you play this, this is
Perfect.
not the beginning of the scenario, obviously. So
Okay.
the officer is making a stop here because he sees a vehicle with no tag. And especially in the Mid-Atlantic, there's a lot of stolen vehicles, crimes committed with vehicles that have the temporary paper tags in them. So right now, he doesn't even see any tag on the vehicle at all. In a tinted van, a dark colored SUV driving through the at nighttime with no tags on. This is an obvious car stop. And then they have gone a good mile and a half, I think the police report says, or even he says, before they get to this point, because he says he's waiting for a well-lit area. So if I'm the officer coming onto this, I first see the vehicle, I call it out, then I light it up, and the vehicle's not stopping. Maybe in that mile and a half, he does. He was truly looking for a lit area. This happens, and understandable. But I'm sure he passed more than one. He didn't pass a mile and a half to hit any well-lit areas. I don't know if that's actually true. But here
I live in the area, and where he is, that's kind of a rural. That is a rural location, so it's very possible to hit a mile and a half. I think Lynn has actually spent some time out here. It's not Norfolk. It's actually on the other side of the river, Isle of Wight, which is a lot of farmlands and open areas. So he potentially was not only away from other turnoffs, but quite possibly in a very dark road.
Yeah, I find this okay, but I feel like I can't help but feel like he's instigating the situation. I mean, a grown-ass man. I don't know, but that's
go through it. I mean, this is why we're here. I mean,
that's getting into opinion territory. The opinion territory that when I see I can understand an unmarked vehicle, so that would happen to me a lot when I would be driving in a Mazda 626 with blue and red little dashboard lights when I was a drug cop. If somebody didn't pull over for a long time, I didn't freak out about it. That kind of made sense. I looked suspicious as hell. But we're not talking about that. We were talking about marked patrol vehicles, and with I'm a little sketchy on it. Opinion though.
No, dude, that's why I have you on, and we have with us. Actually, we have Lynn with us, so we got the two cops. While you guys get along, cool. I'll separate you. Otherwise, no, I'm just kidding.
Actually, I'm not a cop, so I should preface that the only experience I have with law enforcement is as a trainer. And the work I've done with law enforcement overseas, and obviously my business is geared towards training cops and how to be able to de-escalate, mitigate situations. But I would never try to imply that I know what it's like at all to walk a mile in a law enforcement officer's shoes, even though I've done my fair share of ride-alongs and had enough experiences. But it's different, as I'm sure Dr. Wood could attest. Like when you live the life, it's just different. So, but sorry, didn't mean to interject on that one, Eric. I just want to make sure it's clear because my community is the same way. Be very careful what you allude to as far as your background versus what it is, what it isn't. So,
very, very, very true.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Lynn. And for the rest of this, you'll see the officer is conducting or attempting to conduct poorly, very poorly. He is attempting to conduct a classic felony car stop. So he is giving out the commands that you should generally give, but he's obviously extremely nervous, holding his weapon improperly, coming out at gunpoint at this stage where the first officer you can see where he's kind of out of his vehicle and he's at gunpoint. That is, whether we like it or not, this is best practices, traditional felony car stop.
Now, okay, and this is why I wanted you on, because, again, we've had this discussion now a few times. And as you put it, there's a continuity of force, I think you call it, or continuum.
Continuum.
And this was designed by the citizens and put upon the department, or everybody agreed on it. and then we don't like the outcomes. So I look at this and I don't like this outcome. This outcome really bothers me. But then I think about what you say, and that's why I want you on, is because there may be a mitigating factor, things like that.
Well, policing, my argument fundamentally is that policing must be a process-driven operation. The outcomes are going to be extremely varied with all the variables that are coming out. And the two cases that we're looking at, we're going to be seeing extremely different things that take place with very similar situations.
If I could, just as far as like specifically what I get into, and Eric, you and I have had conversations in the past, so I think you've got a fairly decent idea of what I'm all about, what my company is all about, and what we teach. I know Dr. Wood. Can I call you Michael, or is Dr. Wood?
Of course, man.
Okay, I'm just making sure. I like to be, Eric will tell you, I like to be respectful. So like the biggest thing that I see as a issue with security industry in general. So whether we're talking about law enforcement, we're talking about private sector or static, everything from a static, like quote unquote MOCOP, or, static security guard, all the way up to dynamic security, things like, armored vehicles, all the way up to executive protection, things like that. And of course, military, because that's where my background is from, in interjecting all those things. And I view the biggest shortfall across the board is training. And I knew a guy back in the day. This is a story for another time, but his name was VB. It was short for Vanderblast. It was a nickname. His real last name was Vanderplas, but we called him Vanderblast because he was setting up a door charge. And the SOP that we had for setting door charges at that point in time within the Marine reconnaissance community was stored in a certain way next to the other charges. And as he was pulling out the one charge to set it up, it pulled the pins on a charge he had sitting in his pouch, and it set both of them off. The one was sympathetic, the other one was direct. And he was lucky; he survived, and he didn't lose any limbs or his eyesight, but it messed him up pretty good. And so he was the one who told me all the time, SOPs are written in blood. And so when you see some of these things take place, usually the reason why, whether it's use of force continuum, or particular tactics, policy, and procedures that are implemented and used, and that's why I feel it's very important that there needs to be a local aspect to it. There's certain things that, like, okay, hey, we have a standard for the way training is conducted across the board, but each agency is going to deem its own way of doing business. And I think for the local populace, they have to feel like there's that kind of involvement in there. So there is definitely a balancing act that goes on there. But when I see like the video that we just had, the still shot of that, it reminded me of two videos right off the top of my head. I think the first one, if I remember the location, it was Hamilton, and it was basically officer pulled over an individual. He was a drunk driver. Now, part of the backstory of it was the officer knew the guy, and he knew this guy had already had issues before with alcohol and driving and intoxication, so on and so forth. But on this particular situation, this guy decides to shoot at the cop. And so that whole situation played out. And one of the things we use that as for a training tool is the cop already had it predisposed in his mind as to what he was dealing with based on the behavior that he saw in the individual. He didn't know who was inside because how darkly tinted the vehicle was. He didn't know anything about the size, disposition, composition, or the amount of people in the vehicle, whether there's weapons or not weapons, whether it was the person who shows up on the register when he runs it through his MDC, his mobile data center, or not. He doesn't know any of that. And I think you would agree, Mike, that you don't know any of that until you get up to the B pillar on that vehicle. So as you're making your approach, you're assessing the most probable versus the most dangerous course of action. Cognitively, what's going on within somebody's brain, they're already thinking about, especially if I already have it predisposed in my brain, hey, the way this guy was driving, his behavior, the way I see everything going within this vehicle, this is more than likely a DWI. So he already established his most probable course of action. The problem was he also established it as his most dangerous. And in this particular case, the officer failed to, be mentally prepared for the fact that, hey, this guy could shoot at me anytime. And for most officers, the thing that they have to contend with, like I'll ask the question in my class, like, well, in all the interactions you have, how often is a firearm involved? Some are like, oh, this amount of time, this amount of time. The ones who are more senior,
100%,
every single time, right? Because you bring the weapon, you bring the gun to the party, right? And I could show you cop video after cop video after cop video where the guy puts his functional field of view, checks it once, checks it twice, third time he's going for it, right? So that's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing that comes to mind, and it's a famous video that's used in training now, and I think part of it is an homage to Deputy Kyle Dinkeller, because it's a horrific video if you've ever seen it. It was back, I forget the exact date in the 90s, but long story short, it was in the broad daylight. Deputy Dinkeller was pulling over a vehicle for speeding. Guy was doing something like 96, 97 miles an hour on the highway. It was like a 60-mile-an-hour zone, something to that effect. Andrew Brandon, who's the individual that he's pulling over in his pickup truck, drives for like a couple miles and actually takes him off the highway and onto a side road, one of the satellite roads coming off the highway, which one could argue, like, okay, he's stopping in a safe place versus being on the highway.
Or fewer
witnesses. It was this point in time when Andrew Brandon, who is also a Vietnam veteran, starts making some aggressive action. We get into like the 7-step terrorist planning cycle because we talk about things like rehearsals and other intent that's going on there. And we talk about forms of verbal coercion, psychological coercion, because he's like, why don't you just shoot my ass, and starts doing all these other things. The end state is Deputy Dinkeller is brutally murdered on video. And so now this video has been used several times for law enforcement officers in training. And it's me and my partner, the training that we give, we feel that a lot of times most law enforcement and military and other security training, the idea is always go, go, go. Your foot's on the gas, push, push, push. You're getting geeked up by catecholamines, which has the same effect on your prefrontal cortex and your cognitive brain as drinking alcohol. That's why we call it the combat cocktail. So now your critical decision making is being impacted. And now you get hit with a non-standard observation. And we wonder why cops are having these sorts of issues. I would be the first person to say not a single law enforcement officer wakes up in the morning and thinks, oh, I just can't wait to go out and shoot somebody today. It's probably the last thing on their mind, because it doesn't matter. Today, the atmosphere is so litigious now. I have to have articulation and defense for just going up and making a street contact. I'm not talking about detaining anybody. I'm not talking about making an arrest. Just going up and saying, hey, how are you doing today, sir? How's it going? Or whatever. Like, they have to have a reason for it, because it's that kind of an environment. You add to the fact that, yeah, we're seeing the atmosphere and unfortunately these tragedies that are taking place. But then in the same amount of time, I think, and I could be wrong on this, but just in this week alone, the last 5 days, we've had 6 cops shot and at least 3 or 4 of them killed. So you do have to paint in the fact that the officers having this psychologically impacting them, and it is being played into their decision making. And now you have a situation where it's nighttime. So studies are showing that in scotopic or scotopic, which is nighttime lighting conditions, and your rod cells are activated, your cone cells are deactivated. You're more susceptible to furtive gestures in nighttime conditions, or mesopic conditions, which is like the in-between time. So like dusk and dawn, or very, middle to low light conditions. You're really susceptible to furtive gestures. So when you add all those things together, and now you have what I would like to say like a perfect storm of sorts. And then you add to the fact that I feel like I have this overwhelming urge to like, I have a time limit of when I've got to conduct this traffic stop or whatever. And one of the things,
so going to Mike, we've got the psychological aspect, I think, pretty clearly. Do you agree with that, or do you have anything you want to add in?
No, I don't have much rebuttal to that. He's really talking just kind of classic best practices and the things we've learned throughout time. And I'm 7 years removed from the street. I'm in philosophy, and I reserve best practices and tactical operations to the practitioners.
But let's say it's a two-pronged issue, though, because yours is a systematic question of as you put it, processes and things like that. He's saying, okay, here is the psychological or behavioral reaction that is typical. Your job, or what you're working on, is how to change the environment to mitigate, shall we say, the improper or a maladaptive behavior. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, but in a scenario like this, I can't deviate much from Lynn in that you're talking about training. This is an officer that does it, that kind of knows what he's supposed to do, but isn't comfortable when he's not experienced. I don't care how much time he has. He's not done a lot of felony car stops. So how do you get past the idea that he's not trained? You know? Yeah, keep going on it.
Yeah, let's go and watch for a minute because we're talking around it.
Felony traffic stop. Put your hands out the window. Put your hands out the window. Turn the vehicle off. Put your hands out the window.
So right now it appears as if the driver's still riding the brake.
Yep, passive resistant.
Put your hands out the window and turn the vehicle off.
So that's the fourth time now he's given him verbal commands. And he's responding back to him, so that implies that he
finally takes his foot off the brake. Finally.
Yep.
He's not complying.
I have not seen the vehicle go into reverse, so I'm not even sure.
See your hands. How many occupants are in the vehicle?
What's going on?
How
No
many
answer.
occupants are in your vehicle?
It's only myself. Why are your weapons drawn? What's going on?
Open the door slowly and step out.
Now, do
Active
we know
resistant.
what this camera angle is on the driver? Is that his phone, or I'm wondering?
It appears.
Yeah,
to
he
be
filmed it
phone.
himself,
Like
yeah.
a fisheye, like a GoPro
Okay.
or something. It looks like a phone.
It's a clear image. Now, do you? And again, you know, I'm not going to try to mind read, but as an officer on the beat, do you feel like maybe he was setting up a little bit to capture the footage in a way?
Absolutely. He's setting the scenario up entirely.
Okay, well, let's keep watching. Again, I don't want to, you know,
Open the door.
I'm not getting out the vehicle. What's going on?
Get out of the car. Open the door slowly and get out.
What's going on?
Get out of the car now. Open the door and get out of the car.
now here's one. I don't know the laws. I do know that it has been stated, like for single women and things like that, that if there's a car behind you and it's a cop and you feel uncomfortable, to drive to a police station or whatever if you don't feel it coming out. But what are the actual legal requirements if you're told to get out of the car if you are not for?
You
causing
must
a
get out of
hazard?
the car, passenger or driver.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Again,
Yeah.
I don't know the laws.
Yeah, it's
And
case
this
law.
is
You
an
must
issue-
get out.
This is an issue too with Schrodinger's cat, because you have to look at what the officer can observe from their position and their standpoint. And if you look at the officer's view, like the body cam and the webcam is great, but you know, each of these officers only has a 6-degree functional field of view, which is a quarter at arm's length. So they're very focused on what's getting ready to come or not come out of that door. This guy is being actively, he's actively resisting. He's anytime they tell him to do something, he's answering back with another question. It's very apparent what's going on. And you do understand English. You understand you're being given direction. Come out of the vehicle with your hands up. The other thing that could be throwing these officers off, because this reminds me of another situation that happened on I-5 heading north into Washington State. It was a state highway patrol stop. Same kind of scenario, only it was the middle of the day. It was one officer, one highway patrolman, and it was a U.S. soldier. And so the thing you have to look at is I have 3 things to consider. If those officers can see enough where they can see his arms, okay, he's wearing BDUs, he's wearing multicam. So if he is in fact legitimately a soldier, my normal expectation for behavior out of a soldier, out of a military service member, is when they come into contact with a law enforcement officer, it's yes, sir, no, sir, whatever I got to do today, sir, so that you do not give me a ticket.
And he's 100% in violation of military code of conduct.
UCMJ. Yep. You 100%. Uniform Code of Military Justice. You comply with all federal and local law enforcement officers, and you're in uniform, dude. So that's an even bigger no-no right now. And so, you know, the officer's got to ask the question, why is this guy not complying? Especially if he appears heuristically to look like he's a soldier. So a couple of different things could be happening here. One, he may not be actually a soldier. This could be a stolen valor thing or whatever the case may be. 2, maybe he thinks he is. And on one hand, like yeah, maybe the guy's not very well trained, or maybe no, he is very well trained. Or the final thing is okay, I've got a soldier that I'm dealing with here. This guy could be very well trained, because most are, especially any who are in a ground combat or infantry MOS. And now he is refusing to comply with directions from obviously a uniformed law enforcement officer in a marked roller. I would be geeked up too as that law enforcement officer, because what he's probably feeling right now is he has his minimum safe distance. But I mean, me personally, I would be afraid to make the approach on this vehicle, because I don't understand what's going on. Like, why is it so hard for you to just, all you'd have to do is come out of the vehicle slowly with your hands up, and we could start to ramp this thing down right here, right now. We could start to de-escalate this right now.
Okay,
but
question
instead,
from the chat. Got it. Question from the chat. Eva's asking, it's his phone. My question is, why didn't they tell him, or why don't they tell him what's going on? And that might be, for Mike.
I don't have any obligation to tell you the truth. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, I have a warrant murder arrest out for you. I might say, like, it's just a traffic stop. Get out of the car. I mean, they could say anything. The idea that they didn't say anything is no better than not saying anything. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of a weird question to me.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm asking because he is asking back what's going on.
But why would I ever tell a suspect what I was doing? That's just...
Okay.
Keep your hands outside the window. Keep your hands outside the window.
My hands are right here. What's going on?
Get out of the car now.
Get out of the car.
What's going on?
Get out of the car now. Get out of the car now.
What's going on is he needs to get out of the car.
This is how I'm treated.
Yo, what? Guess what? I'm a veteran too. I don't know, babe. Get out of the car.
What's going on?
Get out of the car now.
What's going on?
What's going on? You're fixing to ride the lightning, son.
I'm sorry, what?
Okay, that's probably not a helpful remark. I'm not sure, but I think ride the lightning is you're fixing to be tased right now.
Right.
Maybe I'm wrong. Is there another term? Okay. And I want
right. And so I already have a problem with this, because a taser does kill. So here's the thing is the rules are mostly going to say he can use a taser in this situation, which I would patently agree with. This is not a taser situation, which he will learn and de-escalate himself.
Yeah, okay. I would say, because part of that, while I'm sure the agency is cringing right now in the use of terms, for me, just the experience I've had in every agency is different, but I would expect, hey, let's take a second, exercise some tactical patience here, and control.
Well, I want to keep playing.
Momentum and say, hey, listen, son, what's going on right now is for your safety and ours. You need to get out of the vehicle, and we need to have a conversation with you. If you fail to comply, our next step is to start escalating force. And if we need to, we're going to utilize a taser on you or whatever it may need to be. But we don't have to do all that right now. For right now, just we are law enforcement officers. We need you to get out of the vehicle. Once we get the scene kind of settled down, then we can have a conversation. But for right now, we need you to get out of the vehicle. So make sure it's stopped.
And this is just the first. So hold on. I want to keep playing because this is very significant.
Get out of the car now!
What's going on?
Get out of the car now!
Yep.
Get out of the car!
Sir, just get out of the car. Work with us and we'll talk to you. Get out of the car.
You received an order. Obey it.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, you should be. Get out.
Right there.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I don't have to play the whole thing, but that statement right there, I think, is a large problem. Right after the ride the lightning, now he has actively threatened the person and put him in a box. Now, if he is scared, not scared, now he could be playing games. He may not be playing games, but I have a very deep problem with that statement of, yeah, you should be. When he is the one who is armed, he has all the force, and now we've got an escalation.
Well, the problem with that is all the way around, because I'll be the first to agree that, yeah, it's probably not the best way to, as far as like verbal judo goes. There's officers that for the most part go through training like, hey, this is not just by policy procedure, but again, going back to best practices, this is how we de-escalate, mitigate a situation, because the last thing we want to do is use force. That's a problem nobody wants to deal with, right? So, the only thing I could attribute it to.
Hold on, you're on mute, Mike.
I know verbal judo,
That's such a great point. I didn't hear.
But sometimes in the real, I always laughed about this because we had verbal judo, and the guy who created it came to Baltimore as like the deputy commissioner. And the idea, and I understand this situation, I think he's wrong. But if you go up to some thug on the corner in Baltimore and you're like, excuse me, sir, could you vacate the premises soon? Like that shit just does not work at all.
No, and the only argument I'm trying to make, because I agree with you, like there is a way to listen. My whole platoon, when I first joined the Marine Corps, my whole platoon was half Crips, half Bloods, and then there were some Latin Kings in there, and everybody was from California. Me and a few other guys were the only ones from the East Coast, so it was an education, and people do talk different ways. I guess what I'm saying is the intention is, on one hand, I want you to understand how serious I am about, like, you need to do what it is that I'm telling you to do. On the other hand, I want to be very careful that through my words, through my verbal behavior, that I'm not unintentionally escalating this situation. I think what's part of the problem in this is, deep down, like whether they would want to admit it or not, especially the officer so you have one using non-lethal, one using lethal force, a firearm. The one you can hear it in the one's voice that's just behind the C-pillar. He's actually pleading with the guy. Look, please just get out of the car because I don't want this to go to the next level. So please just do that. So he's literally pleading with him. If you look at it's called paralanguage. If you look at the paralanguage in his tone and what he's implying, he's imploring this guy, dude, just come on, stop fighting us, get out of the car so we can de-escalate this thing and have a conversation. The other officer, like what's going on here is when you've seen so many situations where stuff just goes totally sideways, and now you got a guy who's actively resisting. He is actively resisting. Things are coming out probably not the most ideal way, but he's trying to increase that level of force to like do what it is I'm telling you. And you're hearing comments like ride the lighting and so on and so forth. So I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying that's psychologically that's what's going on. I mean, this is a pressure cooker, so yeah, on face value, that's why I said it's Schrodinger's cat. What's in the box, right? Until this guy comes from the inside the vehicle, they're very aware of his wingspan. And now I have what appears to be a soldier. And again, I go back to what's the normal expected behavior I expect to see out of this individual. And I think that's really what's keying these officers up. Is this is non-standard behavior. My standard expectation for behavior, again, soldiers say, oh, yes, sir, no, sir, whatever I got to do today, what's going on, no problem, I'll come out. Hey, can you tell me what's going on? Yeah, we can tell you what's going on, but first get out of the vehicle. And so there's an interrupt there that's going on. I think that's what I attribute to. I don't think this is intentional. I don't think anybody woke up this morning and wanted any of this to happen, certainly.
Mike,
agree.
Jump in.
I totally agree. I mean, I think they're doing it wrong, but to not be empathetic towards this situation, I think you're the baddie when you can't understand the situation that the officer is in, and he's ill-equipped to handle it, no doubt. But y'all hired him.
Well, not anymore. He's gone, I think.
Well, yeah. But I think he'll get his job back. I think he'll get his job back for that. We'll see.
Well, that's the other thing. So Force Sciences did a really good white paper talk. That was another thing that came out statistically about body cams, is when officers first started wearing body cams by Axon, they were seeing use of forces go way down. But then that would only last for a certain period of time. And then they would get a level
that's
of
like reality TV.
Because I feel like, hey, I got backup with my body camera. And the problem is like your brain chunks information. You don't remember things like a tape recorder. It doesn't happen in sequence. And that's why there's still dispute too as to whether or not officers can review their body cams before or after they make a statement. So that's the nice thing. We have the ability to sit here and look at all these different angles, but we have to keep in mind too, each one of these individual officers only has a certain slice of the pie of the picture of what they're actually able to observe. And that's why things like qualified immunity and stuff like that are important.
Right. The body cams are like reality TV in the sense that, why do they act stupid on the cameras? Everybody knows there's cameras. Well, over time, you get immune to the camera and you just forget they're there. So I can imagine, yes, at first they're self-conscious. Yes, I got a camera. Oh my God, I got a camera. But then you've got a camera all day, every day. It's just there. And eventually it doesn't matter. You just lose track of it. David March, I know you guys already answered this, but hey, it's a super chat. I do need to acknowledge it. Essentially, they had him draw the weapons drawn because the guy had driven for 1.5 miles and didn't stop immediately.
Well, and there's no registration, so they have no information. This is a classic felony car stop. They are doing by the book procedures, like for the first 30 seconds, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's what the chief actually said in that that article, was that they started out pretty good.
Yeah, they did, and then it went downhill.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When sometimes when these have you ever seen the movie Crash? That's a great movie because I think it proves the point. And what you have going on is you have two people going at 100 miles an hour at each other, and they're talking on the wrong frequency. You know, and I'm sure there's some ego involved there. You know, with the soldier, I see that a lot in the veteran community. It makes me sick. But it's like, dude, at the end of the day, I don't care what your title is or who you are. You have a law enforcement officer giving you direction. Your best bet is to follow direction. Hands down.
Well, now, because we're running late, I was going to bring up the other one. No, and no, I haven't really looked deep into it. I've just seen tangential headlines about it. And we had a
it's very basic, Eric. I can explain it.
Perfect, go.
Right. So basically, they do a basic car stop for an expired registration. Simple, normal
deal. I was
deal.
going to the next case, dude.
What's that?
To the next one. I was going to the next one. I was going to say, well, I mean, I got this. I mean, we're in there, and
no,
I think
we're talking about the taser shooting, right? The accidental discharge. Yeah, that's what happened. Same thing. So they had an expired registration, and they're pulling him over. And while they are talking to him, they get back from the dispatcher that he has a warrant out for an armed robbery, and they go to detain him, make the arrest because there's a warrant. He gets back into his car and goes to drive off. The male officer there is trying to pull him out of the vehicle and keep him from getting in. The female officer pulls out her service weapon, tries to make an observation, waits till she has a clear shot, and she says, "Taser, taser, taser," and pulls the trigger and says, "Oh shit, I shot him." She had her service weapon in her hand, thought she had a taser in her hand, and we've talked about this before. I am adamantly against tasers, not a fan of them at all because of this very situation. Either you're using deadly force or you're not, and a taser is a gray area that I am not comfortable with whatsoever. And the fact that it's commonly accepted that you can use a taser in actively resistant scenarios. And I'm sorry, tasers are deadly force. They should only be used when there's deadly force, but those aren't the procedures out there. As soon as you started using tasers and things like that were less lethal force of a thing that's like a handgun, you had to accept that a certain amount of these would happen. Now, can you reduce them through training? Sure, but people's brains do not work perfectly. This malfunction is going to happen, and this is not the first time it happened. Most famously, it happened with the Oscar Grant killing, and that's a public video that people can watch too. And no matter how hard people would have tried to make sure that never repeated itself, as long as you have tasers and you have handguns, it's going going to happen.
So
I would agree with the fact
with
that
her being charged?
It's an over reliance on technology. The first thing that should be being given to law enforcement or anybody who, like, you have to look at it this way: law enforcement's the only profession in the world where a civilian has the capability to coerce you, lie to you, even use force and deadly force under the letter of the law. So it's a bestowed, responsibility. So that's significant, right? So the first thing that should be looked at and always looked at with regard to training is, how do I use this? Because quite frankly, it doesn't matter what you put on my waist here. If I don't have good advanced critical thinking and decision-making skills, conflict resolution skills, learn how to actually talk to people and treat people, it doesn't matter how Gucci the equipment is. That being said, again, going back to like corrupt file folders and the thing, like I'm sure you've probably heard of BolaWrap. I'm actually pretty familiar with those guys, and that's why they actually went so far as with that particular device to make it not similar to a pistol, like to the pistol grip of a firearm. First of all, you don't fire it, you deploy it. I've used it myself, and it is a completely different modus operandi to using that device.
Sure.
And so I think there is a problem there where, like, you know, again, in her head, she was like, I'm using taser. But the thing you have to look at is what's her lowest form of training. And if she spent more time on the range using a firearm than she has actually deploying her taser. In fact, I just gave this example to Viva Fry and Barnes at the tail end of Allison's live stream with them, because we were talking about this particular subject. Had a sheriff's deputy, one of the agencies that we train, we have a train-to-trainer, and we talk about things like feedback loops and corrupt file folders within training. So you look at John Boyd's OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, that decision-making cycle. The more times you complete that cycle, the more times you build adaptability and resiliency. The downside of that,
the loop, right?
Right. The downside of that could be feedback loops, corrupt file folders. Feedback loops, like a skip in the record player. A corrupt file folder. Another form of verbalizing that is like a trainingism, training scar, things like that. So this deputy is like, I have an example where both those things happened at the same time. We were responding to a verbal domestic. We get there, we realize very quickly that it was going from a verbal domestic violence thing to like, no, this is going to be full on like assault, like violence. He's like, problem was the dude was a huge freaking guy. He's like, so I tell my partner, hey, I'm going to go hands on, you go less lethal. So he told his partner to go with taser. He goes, wraps up the guy, and he's like, the shirt just basically fell apart on him. He's like, now I find myself around his ankles trying to do a shoestring tackle, and I'm screaming to my partner, tase him, tase him, tase him. His partner pulls the taser, removes the cartridge, spark checks it, replaces the cartridge, puts the taser back in their holster. Not only does this once, does this 3 more times, and then goes, this damn thing's broken, throws it on the ground. So now you got the huge freaking guy theory with the serial crusher rolling around in the ground in a physical, you know, confrontation, a live taser on the ground. And it's not the issue of that other sheriff's deputy was like a terrible officer or anything like that. It's the lowest level of training, because I may be doing maybe once a year a taser qualification where I actually do a live taser shot on somebody. Usually it's other officers. They do it on each other. Mm-hmm. But every single day, it's a training thing. And I agree with that. I've been tased. I've been OC sprayed. Like, hey, if you're going to use it, you have to know what it feels like.
Have you been waterboarded?
Because it's, you know, you have to know how to deal with that. And I've seen too, both in videos and real life, where somebody gets hit with the taser or gets hit with OC spray and they just shake it off like it's nothing. So you have to be mentally prepared for that too. And the point is, you know, every single day that officer, when they got ready for duty, that deputy, they would spark check and op check their taser, but maybe once a year they'd actually do the taser hit. So I don't view that, you know, as a character flaw in that deputy. I view that as a failure in training. And that's why I go back to the you know, SOPs are written in blood. The sad part is, you know, because I've also talked to other officers and they're like, dude, she should have known the difference of what it felt like to have that taser in her hand versus having that firearm, especially given her experience and years and all those other things. And those things certainly come into play. I'll say this, in both these situations, I wasn't there. But I can point to the fact that, like, that's why training is so important. And I can't say it enough. Like, when we start looking at things like defund the police, that's the first thing that's going to get cut. When a chief or sheriff has to decide on a budget on what they're going to do, whether they're going to do more training or they're going to put more people on the street, they're going to put more people on the street. But now you have more or less trained people on the street, and that's a problem.
Mike, go ahead and jump in.
No, I mean, I think everything he's saying is right, but he's approaching it from the tactical side. I'm approaching it from the philosophical side, where I don't think that you're ever going to be able to get people that can do these things. This is why I keep saying I think we really need a lot less officers that do these type of operations. I just don't think there's enough people that can meet the standard, even having Lynn train them. I don't think there's a lot of people that can do this. And so then we end up as a society asking regular people like that female officer and like that cop from the video we just watched, who I think maybe they could be trained, but I don't know. I kind of doubt that they even have the capability to really do what we're asking them to do.
See, that's where I would probably disagree with you. Because I've seen.
You're a trainer.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but well, let's keep something in mind here. I also survived the test of combat.
Sure.
And in the same 10-year period, when I was fighting in 2 war zones in a regular warfare environment against enemies who I didn't understand the culture, I didn't speak the language, and we lost somewhere well over 20 or 1,800 service members were killed in action. That during that same 10-year period, we had over 2,250 law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. And what I'm saying is, if I can have a 17 or 18-year-old private, PFC, be able to read the human terrain and use advanced critical thinking and make decisions in accordance with policy and procedure and follow a legal, moral, and ethical framework, I don't think it's a bridge too far. And I have these conversations with chiefs and sheriffs.
I'm going to push back
all the time about that.
Hold on. I agree with you on a lot, but as Michael say, I got to push back. And the truth is that you're in an indoctrinated environment. It's very, very much more difficult as a cop who is still a citizen in the area versus a soldier. As a soldier, you literally have signed over your soul to the government. You are no longer a normal person, and you are in a much more indoctrinated type of environment, the mentality, everything going on around it. Now, Mike, you've done both, and while I'm sure that there is a militaristic side to the police, it still is not the same thing.
I find that policing is immeasurably more difficult than the military.
Okay, and is it partly because what I'm saying, like when you're in a combat box and whatever it is, at least you're in an environment where you are effectively in a combat environment or not, or whatever, but you're part of a unit, and that's all they're thinking of. Versus a cop, which you're getting a cat down from a tree, or there's so many levels, and I think it would be
and interactions. There's more varied interactions in what you're supposed to do. The stress amounts of going from high to low, of course, that happens in the military. You go from high to low stress amounts, but the idea that there's a lot of human beings that can gently talk to an 8-year-old about going to school and being respectful to their parents, and then being in a shootout 5 minutes later, and to perform both of those jobs adequately. I think Lynn is genetically predisposed to not have a fight, flight, or fear response, and he thinks that other people have that, and I just don't see that in the data.
Somebody push back on me. No, I'm not advocating for boot camp, Courtney Grace. I'm saying that that's an advantage in some ways that soldiers may have, because they can be stripped down to a certain level and then then packed up. And yes, I have a very sheltered life, John F. Kennedy. Thank you so much. You really don't know anything about me. But
so I was at the School of Infantry West as an instructor. I was a formal schools instructor, a curriculum developer, and I ultimately attained my master instructor certification. And the first thing I'll tell you is that 13 weeks of boot camp does not take away 18 years of bad parenting.
No,
100%. And so yes, you could make the argument of an indoctrinated environment, but if that's the case, then why is it that I also hear arguments where people are like, oh, policing is over militarized when we're trying to teach them effective. Like, it's funny, the stuff that I taught with regard to human behavior pattern recognition analysis, it was originally first developed under DARPA by majority of law enforcement, FBI Behavioral Sciences Division. Sure. You had Malcolm Gladwell, Dave Grossman, you had Ivan Carter, David Scott Donald. I mean, I could list subject matter experts.
You didn't have Malcolm Gladwell, I'm very sure. Malcolm Gladwell is very much against the behavioral sciences unit. I mean, he went after John Douglas personally.
Exactly. But my point is I can still, for me, I'm going to take what's useful out of every side of the argument, and I'm going to apply it to my benefit. Like, for example, we use a decision-making algorithm. And I think this is one thing I actually really do agree with you on, Mike, is it is a philosophy. It's a mindset. So it's more than just tactics. Like I could teach anybody tactics. I could teach anybody how to pit a car. I could teach anybody how to shoot a gun. And quite frankly, if you have to have somebody like me to come in and teach a law enforcement officer how to shoot, move, and communicate when the time is needed for it, then we got some serious problems. The thing that I've always felt strongly about, because I've had these experience with law enforcement professionals who have come out and deployed with me to Iraq and Afghanistan and actually helped us and showed us how to treat these people and build community rapport and affect what we call the 20-60-20 of the irregular warfare environment. Like, that's the magic. And it like on a philosophical level, it's a decision-making algorithm.
let me say this to you,
disagree
Lynn.
with you.
Just let me
with you on that. It's culture, and that's what I'm saying.
sure. But
Is
let
that
me
in the
put in
military environment, you have
perspective
a culture.
something. Lynn, in the Marine Corps, I was average. I went to the Baltimore Police Department and I was the greatest shooter they ever had. I don't think you quite get the difference of the people you're talking about. And it's a very thin, small fraction of the percentage of the population that actually can physically respond. And they're going to self-select them into things that you're also interested in because you're one of those people that are the same way. So now, are those people trainable? Can you do all these things with them? Yeah, I'm just not buying that you can take the lady who killed Terrence McCrutcher and have her ever be an adequate tactician.
Well, to answer that, to that argument, that is a leadership challenge. And
Sure.
I've certainly faced my own leadership challenge. I'm not saying that there's not people out there who don't pack the gear necessary. I was at an MOS producing schoolhouse. In fact, I just had this conversation yesterday with a former Marine friend of mine. And I was like, even though a lot of those, like I trained just in that time period, I trained well over 3,500 Marines.
Mhm.
But out of those 3,500, only 1,500 of them actually met the cut to become a reconnaissance man. And the point is when those Marines left, in my eyes, they were still Marines. They may not have been reconnaissance Marines or scout snipers, but they were still Marines. And my point is like, we got to get back to number one, first and foremost, the level of empathy and realizing that people are the same. And that I have to ask myself the question, like when I go up to do this traffic stop or whatever the form of contact is, because it does boil down to that first contact. How did this thing start? Number one, right? Number two, how long do I have this stop? Well, you want to look at it the way I look at it. You got the rest of your life. So why am I in such a damn hurry? Right? This stop could take however long I need it to take, as long as I can articulate and defend it. Number three, always have a reason for every single thing you do. That includes following SOP, especially if you're going to break from SOP, right? And so when it comes to like the people we're talking about, if it's a discipline issue, if it's a character issue or something like that, then I would argue then, okay, yeah, maybe we need to take a harder look at leadership. And that goes all the way up to the policymakers. Because
that's Mike's specialty right there. That's kind of why I put you together. And by the way, it sounds like we're completely talking past each other. I think we have a heated agreement on a lot of it.
Sure, just different angles.
Well, certainly. Yeah. First of all, if I didn't think like what some of the things that Mike's saying are relevant or valid or good or what the work that he does, I wouldn't sit down and virtually have a beer with them. I don't drink beer with people who I don't want to have anything to do with. So
God, I need to learn that lesson.
I think we could disagree with things and still come to a combined conclusion that, it's really up to, what got me into this to begin with is I sat there and watched a lot of people who were sitting there pointing the finger and doing the shoulda, woulda, coulda, and Monday morning quarterback and armchair general. And the fact of the matter is, I've always believed is when you point the finger, you got 3 point right back at you. So you can either run your mouth or you can get involved and try to do something and not be a part of the problem, but be a part of the solution.
Sure.
So I think, like you said a couple times, Eric, like this is kind of like a two-pronged approach. You can only go so far and affect something in a box on the lower level from the tactical operational level, but to make it from the operational to the strategic level, then you got to attack it from policy. And you have to have reasonable policy. And then just come in and say, hey, because my question I would ask is like, okay, if we're at an impasse here, if they're just people not capable of doing X, Y, and Z, then what do we do? What's the answer? Because
I have those.
So,
he's got a whole series of
robots.
books.
Are we going to go to Skynet or
Well, if you want to learn more about the
t-shirt.
philosophies that I'm talking about, you can buy volume 1 of The Business of Policing on Amazon right now. If you want to learn more of the philosophy, if you want to learn more of the management,
do I get a veteran's discount?
You get a free digital copy. How about that?
I'd love it. I'll send you my book too.
Hey, you know what? This is perfect. It's a good time to wrap up on. We're in heated agreement. This subject's going to keep coming up. I literally got a hold of Mike, 2 hours ago and said, hey, can you come on? So, I wish it didn't come up. I would like Mike to be out of a job personally.
It'd be nice. That's an activist job. You get out of that job.
Find something else to do. Unfortunately, at this point, we really can't. But I guess there's the bright side. I have material, which is really sad.
I would like to say I think it's very important that there are folks just like Mike out there. And like I just came from the ILEADA conference. You remember I jumped on real quick with you, Eric and Allison, when I was there. I think I would just hate for people to lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of people out there who care and do want to help and want to make things better. And I can say from my personal experience that I know what the stakes are. And as bad as it is here, it's much worse in other places around the world. And so, we have a standard, we have an expectation for these people that we trust with our public safety. So I think, that goes hand in hand in it. There is a reasonable expectation that, hey, you are responsible for your actions and you need to be able to articulate and defend that. And you could be, if you can't handle that, then you shouldn't do the job. Right. So I totally agree with that. I'm not trying to make excuses for anybody's bad behavior. So I just want to make sure that was kind of sprinkled in there.
Awesome note. Everybody, if you like this, odds are pretty heavy you're going to be seeing these characters again. So consider subscribing. Hit the like button so maybe somebody else on YouTube will tell others. It's already demonetized. I've already put in an appeal. The second I put in for it, it immediately did it. So again, also locals, consider following me on locals. You can do it for free. You don't have to pay. Love it if you do, but you don't have to. And most of the content that I put out on there is free for everyone. So till later.